I mentioned, I've been rereading Why the Last Man because it's there at the bookstore. I really loved it 10 years ago, and it turns out that it's still really good, so that's great. And I think in terms of the big ideas, it's just as good as it ever was. But I don't know, today I was reading one of the books and I was just like laughing and laughing at like a lot of the dated things that were either like offensive or just like extremely cheesy, weird jokes, or just characters acting in a weird way that I don't think would be depicted today. Um, anyway, I thought I'll make a list of my Why the Last Man lols, and it'll be hilarious to everybody. Now that I'm actually sitting here looking at my list, they're not that funny, but I'm just gonna carry on. I'm sorry if anybody found this because of the algorithm, like maybe Why the Last Man is like a hot topic because of the TV show. I don't know any more about the TV show than you do. Today when I was reading it at the bookstore, this guy told me that the TV show isn't going to happen now, which wasn't what I thought. I don't know, they'd already made the first season, but then the showrunners left or something. I don't know. I hope that it happens. Partly because I would like to see a version of Why the Last Man with some of these things updated a bit. Okay. One thing that made me laugh was there's a flashback to when Yorick got together with his girlfriend. I think this is something where like the degree of like nice guy behavior that used to be acceptable in media and the character was still supposed to be likable is pretty amazing. I mean, when you think about Xander and Buffy, like he was supposed to be likable, and back in the day people thought that he was likable, but he was terrible. I could discuss that another time, but I'm sure a lot of other people already have done that on YouTube, I'm assuming. Okay, yeah, so there's a flashback. York approaches Beth, and he's like, Beth, I had this dream about you that you were a superhero. And they've like never talked to each other before. And then he keeps hitting on her while she's like thinking about how she just broke up with someone. Then she starts crying. She apologizes for crying, and he says, oh, it's okay. You're pretty when you cry. That's how he seduces her. The only other time I've heard of a man saying you're pretty when you cry to a woman was in an episode of Grimm, where this mosquito man told a woman, I like when you cry, and then he killed her and drank her tears out of her eyes. Yorick didn't do that, and apparently Beth liked it. There was another scene. There are a lot of sex jokes, such as they are in Why the Last Man. And in this particular scene, two characters were having sex. They get interrupted with news of like some sort of emergency that they have to attend to. The character who was on top gets up, goes out to attend to the emergency, and says, I'm on top of it. The character who's on the bottom sadly lays there and says, not anymore. Just to clarify, the character who was on top wasn't riding anything. She was just on top of the other character. So by you're not on top of it anymore, the character who's on the bottom just means you're not on top of me anymore. Like, it doesn't really work. But I feel like Brian K. Vaughan back in the day was like, I'm gonna make jokes that are about sex. It's gonna be so funny because they're about sex. What else happened? I guess there are like some things that I find to be somewhat racially insensitive, I guess, I think. As a white person, that's my impression. The trans stuff is obviously the most obvious issue. Like, it's like BKV kind of thought through the fact, okay, if everybody with a Y chromosome died, there would still be living men. And he sort of has the characters pay lip service to that, but they always use weird, like super offensive, like quippy language to refer to trans people. And like, I guess the really weird thing is like the only like AFAB characters you see that present as men are women presenting as men in order to be sex workers. This is another thing. Okay, I can buy that there's like a market for that in that world, but it's like, I've already said this, but I just feel like I appreciate that Why the Last Man acknowledges that, like, you know, not everybody who identifies as straight would actually like not date other women if like there weren't any men left. Like, I like that a lot of the characters do end up doing that, but I just feel like most people, especially women, are just like even more sexually fluid than like he thinks. Like the fact that there's even like a large amount of women that are like, ooh, I guess I can never have sex again because there's no men. Like, I just don't believe that. Like, just think about in your own life, friends. Like, how many women do you know that are primarily attracted to women who have like who have had no sexual or romantic interactions with a man ever? Like, I can think of like one person that I've ever known. And that's not because men are like so attractive. It's just because in our world, like, it's much easier to like find a man who's interested in you. It's like more socially acceptable. You're encouraged to like think that like feelings of attraction that you have to a man are more important. Um, and so those things affect you. And because most of us aren't so like, you know, Kinsey 7, like totally unassailable, like you could be nudged that way. And like likewise in Y the Last Man, I think most women who like basically are straight or were straight could also be nudged the other way. Like, where was I going with this? I was talking about the male impersonator characters. Oh yeah, I guess I was just saying that's one of the aspects of the books that I find the most awkward and offensive, when they try to talk about trans people but then don't depict any and just are very weird about it. Oh, but yeah, there was one particularly silly scene in the book where I was like, wait, so you didn't think about it at all. These other characters are listening in on a radio to a place where Yorick is, and they hear his voice and they say, wow, it's definitely a man because that person has such a deep voice. A woman could never have such a deep voice. Like, turn this ship around. We're gonna go and like capture the one last cis man who's alive and who is such a rarity. Okay, so you heard a man with a really deep voice and you just assumed he was cis. Why? Okay. Yeah. Oh yeah, so there's that. There's like a few, I mean, they use the R word a lot. I was very like, the one I was reading today, which is the Pirates one, which I'm totally blanking on what it's called, but they had this sort of like Lenny character, you know, like a really large developmentally disabled character who's like the muscle. And it was like, really, oh, I guess you think you're being like creative because like you had like a female character be this character type, but not really. I mean, to be clear, I definitely come to praise Y the Last Man, not to bury it, and I know that like times have changed, especially given the fact that like when I was reading this when I was like 20, I don't think I thought very much of any of these things, but like now it's kind of like I'd be really curious to see the TV show just because I would like to see how they address these things. I don't think it's like really things that can't be corrected very easily, which is nice. I think if those were really big parts of the book, it would be harder to enjoy the book. I can't really remember where I was going with any of this. I also don't like the way women are drawn in the book, but I don't know if that's really like a sign of the times or not. I mean, there's lots of different kinds of women and like lots of diverse looking women, I guess, but like everyone's breasts are like up here, like when they're not wearing a bra, and I don't think so. I don't think that's where they are. Um, Maybe I'm just naive. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, okay, the one thing where I was like, really, and like this is even something that I remembered not liking when I was 20, like, spoilers, obviously. Allison falls in love with 355. 355 isn't interested in her and isn't really interested in women, and Allison then falls in love with another lady who's just like there. This can be done well. I mean, I love the way that it happens in Runaways with Carolina. I guess it's kind of the same arc, but like it was good there. But like when I was like 20, I remember like being so kind of grumpy and cynical about it. Like, oh, I can't believe like, you know, Allison can't have the woman that she wants and just has to be paired off with like a random lesbian who's like randomly brought in to be her love interest. That's like so annoying. But like I was rereading it, I was thinking about Runaways and I was like, oh, I must be misremembering it. I'm sure BKV did a good job. Like, oh, here's the character that's going to be her love interest. I'm sure things are going to be good and I'm going to really like this character and I'm going to really ship them. And so the plot's going on. then the love interest character says, okay, I think I'm going to join your group, Allison, and travel along with you, because even in a world of all women, it's hard to meet other lesbians. No, it's not. It's not, for all the reasons that I just said. I know there's other stuff going on in the plot, but like, can you imagine going up to someone and being like, I want to travel along with you because you're the only lesbian I know? Like, isn't that just the most romantic thing that you've ever heard? Oh, so disappointing. I guess those are all my Why the Last Man lulls. Well, this was disappointing.